Hello, friends. This is John Finnegan, and I'm here today with James Iacino, who is the chairman of the Seattle Fish Company here in Denver, Colorado. And he is also today, as the executive chairman of the Seattle Fish Company, running for the 3rd Congressional District on the western slope of Colorado. And so we've got an awful lot to talk about. James, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. I hope you had a great day with Megan and the boys yesterday on Mother's Day and got to take some time off.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day, so we got to get outside and spend some family time. And I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so it's always good to get a chance to spend some time with them, particularly as how busy we've been lately, both on the business side and on the political side as well. It's nice to take those days and spend time with the family.
Would you mind starting at the beginning? Your business career, I think, is extremely important. The fact that your grandfather started this company more than 100 years ago, and the story is compelling and fascinating to me. If you just take a few minutes and start at the beginning, I think for our listeners, that
Sure.
would be important.
Yeah, absolutely. So my grandfather immigrated from Italy in 1905 straight to Colorado and joined his brothers there. His brothers had a little meat market downtown Denver, and a lot of Italians came out and came into the food business, and he got through about 8th grade and had to start helping to support the family. So he would go to the passenger trains that would come through from Seattle through Union Station, and he would buy oysters and put those oysters on a little cart and push that cart around downtown Denver selling oysters and rabbit meat. And his brothers then gave him the opportunity to sell seafood in a little corner of their meat shop. And if you think about Denver at the time, in 19 teens at that point, they hadn't seen seafood, right? So you might have had local trout. There was a history of oysters being able to come out from the West Coast to some of the old mining towns that they would bring from them from the West Coast into Western Colorado in particular. But if you're in Denver, you hadn't seen any, salmon, halibut, lobster, anything like that if you were born here around that time. So it was really entrepreneurial of him. He started then bringing fish by train from Seattle and developing some vendor relationships. And I think the key to the time is keeping fish fresh as it is today in the supply chain. And he was very innovative in finding a way to mix sawdust with the ice so it would create kind of a slurry that the fish could be in that would allow the fish to go on the express trains rather than having to stop at all the ice stops along the way. Because with seafood, the clock is ticking right away. So, it's counting down. You got to keep it fresh. And so he found a way to bring that fresh direct and really establish the market for seafood that didn't exist in Colorado. So, he started selling product to the Brown Palace and the Oxford and some of the long established businesses that are still there today. But in 1918, he incorporated the company, called it Seattle Fish Company because all the fish was coming by train from Seattle. And that's where we are. 102 years later, 3rd generation family company that's been now doing seafood processing and distribution for that time. So I started at a young age, as with any family business, you want to learn the ropes and get involved. So during breaks from school, I started at the age of 12. I'd go in with my dad in the morning. My dad did all the purchasing for the company while running the company, so he'd buy the fish. So he'd have to be in the office by 5 a.m. because the East Coast was already opening up. And so, get online with the auctions, not online, but on the phone with the auctions and start purchasing the fish. So I'd go in, do some paperwork. When I was 13, I started working on the dock, cutting some fish and then loading trucks. When I was 16, I started driving trucks and drove trucks all the way through college. I really enjoyed interacting with the customers and the chefs and hearing about the product. And, it was great to get that experience. And then ultimately I went to Colorado State University and double majored in political science and business management. And I found that I have a knack for sales and really enjoyed sales. And so got into the sales realm, started selling the Fort Collins market and the Colorado Springs market. building relationships, and then very quickly moved up into a sales management position when one of our managers left, and kind of rebuilt our incentive program, changed the way that our culture within sales, focusing on upselling, developing new products, long-term relationships, and marketing a different message, which was sustainability at the time, which is still a core value of ours. Something that at the time, this is mid 2000s, was still not really talked about, surprisingly. It's surprising how quickly it's moved in that direction. But we took the lead as a company at the time when my competitors were saying it was a fad and it was all buzzwords. And we bet pretty heavy that it wasn't a fad, and started developing relationships with multinational nonprofits, the Marine Stewardship Council, Monterey Bay Aquarium, and in hopes to educate our customers and be a resource for them on how to make better decisions in fish. So, started managing sales and putting that message out there. We didn't have a website when my dad was running the company, so developing our website and our information resource, and we grew substantially. And I took over as president in 2010, and we've since tripled the size of the company up until today. Up until a couple of months ago, when our business was cut in half, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's a little history of the company and my involvement there.
You were so generous with your time a couple of years ago when you hosted me and two of my colleagues, Rick Russin and Jack Buffington. Rick is building a STEM program for Valor Christian right now, and he apologized that he couldn't be here to visit with you this morning. And Jack Buffington is a professor at DU who's creating a supply chain management program for DU, along with his other day job, which is running plant logistics for Miller Coors. In fact, I was on a conversation with him earlier today. But you were so generous with your time. Supply chain was something that business people have been talking about for many years, but now it's commonly spoken of because we can't get things, whether it be simple things like toilet paper to critical life-saving masks to our healthcare workers. So supply chain, your background and knowledge in business is, I think, going to be extremely helpful for your campaign and your political career going forward.
Yeah, and supply chain in seafood is much more challenging than people think. I mean, people ask what we do, and I say we're really a global supply chain logistics company because we source globally, and we're 24/7 operation, 365. We are that behind the scenes infrastructure that makes sure that people can go out and eat. And, I would tell people in sales when they'd ask me that question, they'd say, what do you do? I'd say, well, pretty much any chef in the city or in the territories we serve, which is about 12 states, any chef can call us until about 8 p.m. and the next morning essentially have any fish from around the world delivered to their door. Wow. And everything it takes to make that happen behind the scene is all supply chain. So you have to have great supplier relationships. You have to understand importing and who's going to clear customs, where the fish is going to be processed, how it's transported, and it's consistent. It's nonstop, and you have to take into account trucking routes and large global weather events. I remember when our supply chain was severely disrupted because of the volcano in Iceland, and it disrupted air travel from the UK, and all of our Scottish salmon couldn't get in. And we had salmon sitting at the airport in London that couldn't get out because they had canceled supply. So you've got a lot of those issues. You could have a strike down in Chile. You could have, what we have today with, import restrictions by certain countries and countries shutting down. So it's really a nonstop challenge. And what was kind of frustrating for me in business school as an undergrad is I did an advanced purchasing class, which is essentially supply chain management, they call it now, that's kind of transition. And it was all about widgets and economic order quantities and, assuming that things don't go bad, how do you manage that inventory? And nobody was talking about perishable products, and that it's a completely different game. We have food safety to consider. We have temperature that we have to maintain throughout the supply chain. If anything ever goes above 40 degrees at any point in the product coming from us globally, we have to reject it for food safety. And right. So, you've got a lot of those aspects that weren't considered in traditional business school. And so it's definitely a challenge, and we continue to stay on the cutting edge where we can with time temperature recorders and ensuring that we can monitor progress along the way, and now GPS tracking of trucks, and airline relationships and booking reservations out a long way in advance for our consistent supply. It's seafood luckily does get the second highest priority in shipping, only to fresh flowers, which is interesting. So then around Mother's Day, you might have challenges where our fish is getting bumped for flowers, which is a challenge too. So it's definitely that's the crux of what we do. Not only do we market seafood products, but really what we do that sets us apart, that creates that high barrier to entry, is managing those relationships and that supply chain in a way that others can't.
I don't think we'll ever take it for granted again, given what we've gone through. If there's a silver lining to the crisis that we've experienced over the last couple of months, that will be one of them, is the education that we've received and the need to put that into public policy, which leads me to my next comment and question, which is the fact that 24 years ago, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia, and that took me down the path of non-communicable diseases, where I spent a good portion of my career. And there I've had an opportunity, because I'm no longer on staff with the American Cancer Society, but I still am a volunteer for the extramural grants department. And I work side by side with these incredible scientists on the extramural grants department. I get to see them and the knowledge that they possess. And on the communicable side, with the coronavirus and COVID as a disease, I know that we have such great knowledge, but we haven't translated that into public policy. Right. And here we are today. We used to be the envy of the world, and we aren't today. So how can we restore what we the view of the world as they look to America and think of us as this shining example of healthcare? Mm-hmm. And how can we get back to that and implement policies that'll be more effective and save lives?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of aspects to this where the United States really leads, and one of them is funding, and in our CDC efforts and funding for the WHO, and ensuring that we have the adequate resources. The U.S. being the largest economy in the world has the opportunity to lead in terms of providing steady resource and financial stability for these organizations and these scientists to work and develop, not only the infrastructure to respond to a pandemic, but the opportunity for research and development and vaccines and what it's going to take, contact tracing. I mean, these are things that these areas that we specialize in that we haven't been fully funding. And that's definitely a challenge for us. And it's something that I think coming out of this is going to be a large topic of conversation in terms of fully funding these organizations and ensuring that we're putting the proper people high up enough in the government to take it seriously, because we see the impact this can have. This is the same impact, if not worse, than a war situation, right? Where you have devastating, economic results from not being prepared for this. And we need to be treating it as such, because this will not be the last communicable disease pandemic that we have. And it's time for us to lead in terms of funding and having the people focused on this at a high level of government. The other piece kind of types into that supply chain as well. To function in this international economy, you have to have strong global relationships, and you have to have that ability to communicate and to transmit information and to work together. And we see that, in our supply chain, that you have to be able to work with the private sector, working with the public sector, ensuring you have the policies to move products safely around the country. And I think that this goes back to our lack of fully being invested in our diplomatic efforts. Over the last few years, we've really severed some ties with some of our allies around the world, and not been in a position where it's kind of become the mantra to, America first and everybody else aside, until you have a situation like this that is global in nature. And now you don't have the communication lines set up, and you don't have the ability to respond as a global community. And now you're on your own. And this is something that clearly required a global response, not just a United States response, not just a European response, not just an Asia response. And that's something that I think will come out of this, as well as the importance of strong diplomatic relations. That starts with fully funding our State Department, keeping the key bureaucrats that have been there for years, that are focused on this, that have those relationships and that expertise in place to ensure that we have the resources necessary to function in a global society and respond as a global community. And I do think that this is something that we had, during the Obama administration. We saw the Ebola risk break out in Africa, and we saw an immediate response before it was ever the thought of it possibly coming to the US, was putting CDC on the ground in the countries that were affected and developing the protocols and the tracing necessary and the policy on ensuring that we stopped it where it was, as opposed to letting it get to us and having to respond. And we ended up having one case come over to the US, and we're able to isolate and take care of that. That's what happens when you have a forward-thinking policy around this is a threat. We do need the resources to provide it, and we have the relationships where we can send our experts in to help solve it where it starts, as opposed to having to react. You got to be proactive in this environment. So I think that's some of what's going to come out of this is a clear understanding that we didn't invest in the infrastructure necessary. We didn't have the relationships to respond, and those are things that we're absolutely going to need in the future if we're going to be successful.
As a business leader or as a politician, there are two important things that you need to do, and one is to process issues, and the other is to process opportunities. You learned that by being a Vistage member as a CEO for many years, and you were instrumental in having me head down this path as well. Are any of the things that you learned during that period of time going to carry over in
Yeah.
your new profession?
Absolutely. I think the biggest one, what I loved about Vistage, is you have CEOs from a variety of industries, right? And so it's not industry specific. So I'm not just talking to other seafood CEOs. I'm talking to people in oil and gas and technology and manufacturing, and we have a variety of perspectives. And I think one of the key learnings is to bring that to what I would be doing in Congress, which is getting the smart people from a variety of disciplines around a table to bring the best thought. And that's where you can really process an issue, because somebody in manufacturing is going to be thinking of something differently than somebody in distribution. And we're going to be able to work together to come up with a common solution to the problem. And I think that diversity of thought, the ability to challenge each other, to bring in different opinions, all to get a better solution, is a key skill set that we need. And it can't be isolated to here's what my party is thinking, or here's what just one group of people are telling me. You have to have that diverse array of opinions and people from different expertises to come together, process the issue, come up with a strong solution, get alignment, and communicate that out in public policy. And I do think that that's one of the key areas that I learned in Vistage that I'm going to be bringing to Congress as well.
How has your message been received, or messages been received, in the 3rd Congressional District? Have you had any experiences that were unexpected?
Well, the crisis has definitely been unexpected.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's a challenge. But even as a result, yes, I think even before the crisis, the message was being well received, that we need people who are willing to work across the aisle. We need people who are willing to bring people together rather than dividing us apart, and come up with solutions that are going to actually have positive results on people's lives. And that's what people are really looking for today, that they might not be getting in their current representation. And so I think people will have a hunger for that. They have a hunger for getting things done and not just arguing and blaming each other for problems, and having a level of communication that's successful. But also, people tend to vote with their wallets. They tend to want business solutions, economic development, reducing risk so we don't have bubbles and bursts in different parts of the economy, which has been a historic challenge in our district. We've seen oil and gas in Grand Junction be such a major part of the economy that when it has prices tank like they have today for economic reasons, supply and demand, and foreign relations, we've seen Grand Junction turn into a ghost town. And 30% of the people lose their jobs, which is devastating to the economy. And so what we need are economic growth opportunities. One area is outdoor rec, as an example, that has been growing and is now 12% of the state's GDP, and it continues to grow. And we see manufacturers moving to Grand Junction, and outdoor ropes courses and mountain bike manufacturers, and opportunities to tie in with our tourism industry, which ties into our public lands policy, but all in an effort to create new industries that reduce the risk of being too isolated. And that's something where, I think people are looking for business experience, somebody who understands that on a macro level, on an economic level, and then on a micro level. What does it take to balance a budget, to run a P&L, to invest in your workers? What do great wages and great benefits look like in terms of retention and allowing new jobs to grow, attracting talent, attracting people to the Western Slope where they want to live and work, and have those opportunities so they can be out here and be successful. Somebody who understands the infrastructure and the investment that it takes. At Seattle Fish, we don't mind taking on debt as a company when we're investing in things that are going to pay off a decade from now, because we think generationally. And I think that that's something that's been appealing to the electorate, because they want people who have that longer term view, who understand, what it's going to take. For example, broadband. We need broadband access throughout rural Colorado, and we don't have it, which can hurt our education system, hurt our STEM development for the jobs of the future, and even now in the healthcare crisis, not allow some communities to have the telemedicine, capabilities that other parts of the state and urban areas do have. So, I think people right now, and we've seen it since the crisis, particularly with the unemployment where it is and continuing to grow, people are looking for business leadership, somebody who understands how to grow jobs, understands what it means for people's paychecks on a day-to-day basis, how to reduce those costs so they can retain more of their money for education, for retirement. And that's something that I think is going to be more and more important coming out of this crisis, that will continue to have our message resonate. This isn't a time for blame. This is a time for analyzing what didn't work in the past from a government level, and what are the policy changes we can make in the future to help us be more successful, help us have a more robust economy that's going to allow us to stave off future challenges.
James, I know you have the education, the experience, and the intellect to do this job in Congress, and to do it in an extraordinary way, and I wish you the very best. What can we do to help you succeed in your mission here?
Yeah, I think it's, spreading the message. Every seat is important, and regardless of whether it's the Senate or the presidency or the House, I think that we need people who are willing to work together, who are tired of the divisiveness, who want to bring people together for common solutions. I do think we need more people with business experience. I'm talking about small business experience in Congress. You'd be surprised how few people have actually run a business who are dictating policy that affects businesses around the country.
Yeah.
So supporting candidates like that, like myself. I think we need more doctors in Congress. I think we need people who understand healthcare policy. I think this is something where the founders intended people of a variety of skill sets, as we were talking about in Vistage, to step up and serve their country, and we need to support candidates like that. So for me specifically, spreading the message, our website is www.jamesforcolorado.com, all spelled out. Check out our website. If you like what you see, please support us and spread the word and send that out to your networks. We have a variety of events. We've gone completely virtual in this environment. So we have weekly virtual town halls where people can hop on and ask questions, and I'm happy to be available. We're providing resources on our website for those, particularly in our district, but also talking about policy changes we can make. And I'd love to hear people's feedback. Again, the more feedback we get from a diverse array of folks from around the country and around the world, I think is only going to make stronger policy. And so, we want to bring the best to DC, and I appreciate the support. So jamesforcolorado.com, and that's the best way to help us out.
Well, I've gotten to know you and your family personally. I know your heart's in the right place. I really wish you the very best. And so thank you for being with us today. And I look forward
Absolutely.
to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, James. You too. Bye for now.
Bye bye.